Welcome to the Position Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Capasso, and we're here to learn together. I'm on a personal research project to understand how elite performers in sports, military, and the creative arts make successful transitions into their personal and professional lives beyond those early pursuits and endeavors. And I have a theory that the environment that someone chose or that chose them, and the position or role that someone played in that environment that they chose or that chose them, can provide the keys to understanding their best path forward. We're just getting started, and I'm excited to share these dynamic stories with you. Let's dive in. I remember in the early days when we first got to know each other, following you on Facebook. In particular, I loved your Facebook group that was around Beyond Finish Line,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
what that was about and what you were trying to explore there.
Yeah. I've struggled a lot with the transition from athletics to the next thing. And what's funny is a lot of people who know me, who are kind of like just witnessing my experience, they're like, oh my gosh, you've transitioned so well. How have you done this? Like, you've done so many cool things. And a lot of times, I mean, we never know what's in someone's journey. And I've struggled a lot with it. And just really started realizing so many people are struggling with it. And there's not really a great forum for discussing it on a consistent basis. And so I created After the Finish Line, which was going to be a podcast and a community of people who were transitioning from athletics into whatever their next endeavor was, and have conversations with people who've been in that transition, elite athletes, elite military people transitioning to the next thing. A lot of commonalities in there. And the Facebook group After the Finish Line was just a lot of conversation amongst people who were athletes making that transition, lessons they learned, struggles they've had, things they wish they knew. It's almost like you needed a coach, you needed to be on a team, and then you go from being on a team and having coaches to like just drifting around in the world on your own, figuring out this next big challenge.
So what was like for you personally, what was the hardest part about making that transition? You talk about the struggle, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about what you also learned about other people's struggles, how that was related or not. But for you personally, what was the hardest part?
The hardest part is I felt like I had a really great idea of what it was to have something that you really loved, that you wanted to pursue to the best of your abilities, you wanted to fully commit everything in your life to, and you get a great sense of what that looks like and feels like. And then you go out into the real world and you do so many different things, and you benchmark it against this thing that you loved, that you were good at, that you had dreams with, that you were celebrated for, that you got accolades for. And then you're doing a bunch of stuff that you think to yourself, I mean, who cares? Like, I booked a meeting, I made a sale. Like, this is so irrelevant. I'm selling HR software. Like, really, this is what I'm getting amped up about? So many things. I'm selling, snacks, and this is what I'm getting excited about. Like, it was just hard to know what it feels like to be in your zone and your sweet spot, and almost like what you were called to do. And then basically going through a bunch of different things to figure out what might I be called to do in this next phase of my life.
So like, when was the moment that you knew that you were officially making the transition? Like, do you remember, was it a moment, was it a period of time when you were like, I'm competing at this level and it's time for me to leave that behind and go to the next thing? Was that a moment in time? Was that a period of time that was longer? What was that? What was going through your head in that time? Like, how did you come to that?
Yeah, a couple of different things. One, when I finished my last competition in Israel in 2013, I went to the Acton MBA program. I remember one late night, I had this epiphany, and I wrote my parents and my sister and my wife a long email. And I recognized that I had to move beyond potentially competing again, because it was so self-focused. And I realized that that's not a way that I wanted to live anymore. Everything was about me and my journey and my training and my recovery and my competitions for years. And people revolved their life around that. And I realized, I was 29 years old. I realized to myself, oh, wow, that's not the life that I want to live anymore. And they responded to me, oh, hey, well, you're in the middle of the MBA program. You don't need to decide now. Because this was 2014. I was thinking about maybe trying to compete for the 2016 Olympics. I just missed the 2012 Olympics. And so then a good friend of ours, Stephen Tomlinson, he has this idea of don't discard. So after my MBA program, I was like, okay, I'm going to go and train in the morning with the guys at Texas and swim. in the afternoon, I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to work on this business that I'm starting. I'm not going to decide, hey, am I going to just train full time or am I going to do this business? I'm just going to let them talk and, coalesce and see what happens. And it became obvious that my heart was not in training in the way that it once was. And in order to be at that level, it takes everything. You've got to be able to put every ounce of your soul, or at least I did, into competing at that level. And I knew that I wanted to compete at a different level in a different realm and get the best of my abilities and pursue my potential in a different way that was outside of sports.
Yeah. I think that's super insightful. And as you think about, you wrote the letter, you're sharing with friends and family, this is not the life I want anymore. It's so self-focused. If you could go back to that point in time, which I guess now is a decade ago, which is crazy to think, what did you want? What did you think? Did you know what you wanted? And if so, what were you sort of trying to point at then?
I think everyone wants the exact same thing. I want to find something that I love, that I'm good at, that makes an impact on other people and ultimately creates value for myself. That was the case in athletics for me. And I wanted to do that in another realm. I just didn't know what it was going to be yet.
Yeah. So what was the first step that you took? What was the first? Was Athletic Foodie your first venture into that?
Yeah, that was the first step. I had an idea that I'd been working on and I wanted to pursue it. After my MBA, I was in a position where I had a runway and I was married and I had a wife that could support me for a while and support our family. And I continued, pressing on that. And it was funny looking back on that. That was pretty much a solo venture that had other contractors that were contributing to me. And one of the things I've learned is that I'm not the best when I'm doing something by myself. I don't really love, doing things by myself. And what's funny is a lot of people think swimming is an individual sport. It's really individual when you get to the block for your race. But when you're training, I mean, it's so much of a team. Like, yeah, in between the sets, you're, swimming and you're in your own brain going back and forth, doing different things. But like every rep, you're talking to people. Every rep, you're in the fight, trying to make the set, make the, interval, push as hard as you possibly can. You're looking at other people, you're feeding off their energy in the weight room and in the pool. And here I was on my own, trying to create that energy myself with no teammates, no coach. That was really, really challenging.
Yeah. So then in terms of the transition, how would you rate or how would you place that experience? What did that offer to you in that next step? Like what did you take from that to move on to the next thing? And maybe what did you leave behind from that part of the journey?
I took that it was valuable to go on something that I was excited about initially, and I learned a lot of things. And I took $10,000 and I did $380,000 in revenue in 22 months. And there were some really meaningful things like, wow, I took a lot of the learnings from my MBA program and I applied them and it worked. And I think it's just like, how do you continually spin what you're learning and what you're doing into the next thing and use all the learnings to the next thing and use the relationships and leverage all those things. And it also took I don't want to do things on my own again. That's not a great recipe for me. And it took me, I don't know, the kind of way I look at it is I learned, I was on my first swim team when I was 4. I didn't swim year round and fully commit to it until I was 14. And I did a lot of different sports in between there. And I took Athletic Foodie as one of the tastes, one of the experiments on my road to figuring out what is my spot. And some people find it really early. Some people, it takes them a long time to find. Some people, I think they're just doing something because they're good at it and it provides some type of status or money. And they're just I know plenty of people, they can just do a job because it pays them money and they don't even care about the job. And they'll just do that for 20 or 30 years because they think that's what's required. I just never been able to do that.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I just could never do it. And honestly, that's why I wasn't a great seller for you at Kazoo is because at the end of the day, I just didn't care about the product. Yeah. I was not excited about the product. I didn't like the customer I was selling to. I wasn't, it's not that I didn't like him. I wasn't inspired at all by the customer that I was selling to.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit, but I think there's strategic sellers, and Caroline is a great example of that. They know all the different sales techniques and they know, these products, and they know the gaps and how to, tailor the conversation of what this company wants to the gaps and the research and all this stuff. And then there's inspirational sellers where you're personally invested, you're personally inspired by the thing that you're selling, and you can almost just transfer that energy and a story to another person. I'm definitely an inspirational seller. And when you look at some of the things that I've gotten people to take part in with me, um, selling them inspirationally, it's not even selling them, it's like inviting them on a journey with you. That's something exciting. Stephen Tomlinson talks about like finding a bug that you're both excited about exploring together and seeing what you can discover. I mean, that's something that I'm made for, and some people would say I'm exceptional at, in ways that, you know, sometimes I get myself into things that aren't the best, and I get other people into things that maybe like become challenging, or maybe we should have thought more before we got into it. But I can get really excited, and then, you know, that fuels me and other people around me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in my experience with working with you and knowing you personally, and you already described some of this in making the transition, you're really clear on kind of your values and your beliefs and how, and you want to make an impact in the world and what impact you want to make and how you want to make it. And I think that comes through in what you're describing. Those scenarios may not have been well aligned with the impact you want to make and how you want to make that impact.
Yep.
So I think that definitely comes through. And I'm curious because, you know, you talk about Stephen and kind of looking at the bug together and looking at a problem with people. In the time I've known you, you've talked a lot about puzzles and solving puzzles and how interested you are in breaking down and understanding puzzles. Where do you think that comes from?
Sports. It's just a big puzzle. And I learned that over the course of swimming. I think there's a debate of like, you know, is it really the little things that go into creating this, you know, really magical high level thing? Or is it like a couple things that you do or you have unique attributes to? For me, I 100% believe I was never the biggest, strongest, or most talented. I have to do a lot of things right. I was very skilled on my kick in swimming, and I understood how to move through the water in a way that a lot of people didn't. But I had to do all the little things right. It was a puzzle of what did I eat? When did I go to sleep? Who was I seeing to get recovery? Staying afterwards to work on my starts and turns, learning from everyone I possibly could of race strategy and how to enter my hand in the water, and all those little things put the puzzle together. At the beginning, I didn't even know where the 500 pieces were of the puzzle. I knew where 13 of them were. And then I got around other coaches and other athletes, and I discovered more pieces, and I learned how to put them together. And that's super fun when you can start gathering puzzle pieces and put them together and see the momentum you're building. That's something I really love. And it's just figuring out, I think, like, what puzzle do you want to solve?
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like Athletic Foodie probably gave you an interesting puzzle to put together.
Yeah, to some degree.
To some degree, right? It had elements of essentially impact that, you know, you were passionate about in terms of helping people connect with more healthy eating and finding more simple ways to do that as an athlete. But had the missing element of like team and people. So post Athletic Foodie, what was sort of next on that journey? What was the next thing?
Going to work at the Acton MBA.
Acton MBA, right? Yeah.
You know, in recruiting, sales, you know, functioning there. And then I became the CEO there. I loved Acton. It changed my life in a big way. And that's an example of something that was inspirationally selling. I had a lot of energy for that place. I had a lot of adoration and love for it. And I could transfer that energy to people who were interested in what that could create for them, and almost showcasing what that experience could mean for them and how could it change and impact their life. And I really enjoyed that place, and I loved those people. And I think ultimately what I learned, Warren Buffett has this quote, you know, if you have to choose between a business and a great manager, like a bad business will beat a good manager every single time. And ultimately, I think that was a really hard business to be in. And it was a business. We were a nonprofit, but you know, everything's a business. You're selling something, you're trying to contribute to people, they're paying you something for it. And a 1-year MBA that no one had heard about, that created a lot of value for you personally in a market where people wanted an MBA that was a credential that was known, that they could put on their resume. That was a very, very hard thing to grow. And that's one of the things I learned. And you asked me this question, like, what are some of the things that you tell your early self? It's like, find a great entrepreneur that you want to work with or alongside, or in your case, like, you were the reason I went to Kazoo. I was inspired by you. I wanted to learn, alongside you and from you. and I wasn't that excited about the product, but it's like, can you find a great entrepreneur or leader or mentor to go work with? And if you happen to find yourself in a great business, that's like the best combination. If you can only choose one of those, I would say definitely find the person first and learn as much as you can, and you'll find your way into that business.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I don't know if we talked about this, but so I recently read the book Mastery by Robert Greene. Have you read that book or seen it? So, Robert Greene's written like 48 Laws of Power and several other books, more social psychology kind of books. But this one in particular unpacks the journey that people take to mastery in whatever domain that they're in. And that journey practically goes through some form of apprenticeship into some, he would call creative expression, and then into mastery. And so I think maybe you're highlighting a little bit like step one is to find that mentor or leader that could put you into some apprenticeship, perhaps around what's next, and kind of launch you in a direction, but launch you through the connection with a great leader. And I can think of a lot of reasons why that's super helpful too. Besides the fact that if they're a great leader, they're probably predisposed to invest in people, right? And commit to people and help people grow and succeed. Otherwise, they're probably not considered a great leader, realistically.
Yeah.
There might be a great entrepreneur or a great like business leader who's great at maybe bringing people together, execute a vision, but just a great leader as a whole will invest in other people. And then the other thing is they probably have a great network and are probably willing to share that network with you, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, if that's step one, and if you're kind of now connecting the dots of journey beyond, what would be a second piece of advice or step two to like piecing together how to go from that moment of like writing that letter, hey, I'm ready, okay, maybe step one is, okay, find a great mentor, leader, someone you can attach to and kind of learn from. What else comes to mind as you've gone through that journey that you would put along that
Taste
piece?
a lot of things, try a lot of different things, what you might be good at, what might be exciting to you. I mean, in my mind, it's what do I have energy for and what gives me energy back from the world. I mean, in swimming as an example, I had a lot of energy being in the water. I loved it. I felt good. And I got a lot of positive energy and feedback from the world that I was good at it. If you have a lot of energy for selling something, but the world doesn't ever give you energy back by actually making a sale, that might not be a fit for you. Right? And unfortunately at Kazoo, I had, a 0-0 on that. Like I had no energy for the thing I was selling. I had energy from working for you and learning from you, but like I wasn't getting energy back, or feedback in a positive way in any meaningful sense from the world. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, I think that's the thing for me, taste a lot of things, try as many things as you possibly can. I mean, I was really interested in food for a long time, and I went while I was still training at the end of the summer, at the end of the competition season, I went to the most famous restaurants in New York, France, Italy, Denmark, Spain. And I learned from these really famous restaurateurs, famous chefs, what it was like. And you talk about the apprentice piece. That's the best way to learn in a kitchen. Is like they say in a kitchen, go to the best place you possibly can first, because they train your eye for what to look for. They train your eye and your hand for the technique, how to do things right. Later on, you can decide if you don't want to hold those standards or keep those standards in your own restaurant or your own kitchen, but start there. And that's why a lot of people go and apprentice in a lot of different types of restaurants. They learn different standards and techniques and different types of cuisine. I mean, you talked about like, the first step is the apprenticeship, then it's the creative expression. Well, you can't really have a creative expression unless you know standards of cleanliness and how to use a knife and how to broil things and how to, sous vide things and all those different things. So it's like, find a mentor, find a coach, find a entrepreneur you're excited about, learn a lot of those ways of thinking, and then try and apply it, as you find other mentors, entrepreneurs to different things. Like I've done, sales. I've been in the sports performance nutrition business. I was in selling HR. I was in, the education space. I've been in the real estate space. I was in the software space with Campground Booking, which we sold to Camping World. I worked in a Fortune, 500 or 100 company, whatever Camping World was, $7 billion in revenue a year. And now I'm in, what's really cool is I'm in the real estate mixed with customer guest experience phase, which is really interesting because the thing that I love so much about those restaurants, it was the food, yes, but it was the fact that someone could come into an amazing restaurant. And we saw this, like they could have a bad day. They could have split with their, business partner or whatever. And over the course of several hours between the food and the experience and the wine and the ambience, you can completely change how someone feels. And that gave me so much energy of just like, I was inspired by these chefs because they were able to change the way someone felt while they were there. And that's something we were able to do at Gather, which is someone comes in and they're just shocked by how clean our place is, how friendly our staff is, that we open the door, that we guide you to your site, that we help you find places that are nearby that you might like to, be part of in terms of dinner or events or people. And I get a lot of energy from giving those experiences, and we get a lot of energy back in terms of reviews, repeat guests. And it's taken me 10 years and a lot of different things of tasting and trying to get to that point. And now I find myself paired with like a really great entrepreneur partner in what I think is a really good business. And the business piece will definitely, be evaluated over time. Hopefully it continues to be a good business. But it's taken me 10 years to get to this like place. And now I'm 38 years old. The runway, hopefully could be another 40 years. And I was thinking about this as I walked in. It's like, what is my definition of success? I was thinking about that. And I was like, to find something that makes me come alive, that I love, that I can do for the rest of my life. That's success. Like success for me used to be money. Oh, I want to sell Athletic Foodie for $30 million and retire on a boat. And I've unpacked that. And what that really was is my fear of never being able to find something I loved as much as swimming. And that would never be as good as something I was in swimming. So I was like, let me just get a bunch of money so I can just retire and not have to worry about that problem, that fear of never finding something again. But I think all of us walk around wishing and hoping and wanting to have something we love that makes us come alive in the morning, that wants to get up, that gives us energy, that we also get energy back from the world or from our family or from customers, that like we're valued.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. And I had a very similar feeling. And so I'm glad to hear that you had the same one. And maybe many athletes have this feeling as I looked out ahead and I thought, okay, I'm on this journey to try to be a professional soccer player and play on my national team and reach my potential in this sport as high as I could. And I thought, there is no life after 30. Like I thought at some point I would retire around 30. It was at that time like a pretty standard retirement age. And I thought, what am I going to do after that? Like there's no way. Like nothing could eclipse or match any of this. Like there's no way. And it wasn't that I would just like close up shop and put me 6 feet underground and be done. It wasn't quite that. But it was like, what could possibly be there after? And it is amazing to see what is possible and how you could actually transcend all that and actually go well beyond that experience if you can use that experience. But I'm curious about like, cause you've talked about what gives you energy and where you get energy back. And so swimming. So why did you choose swimming? Cause you were playing basketball, right? Kind of growing up, other sports. Why did you decide to lean into swimming?
It was kind of in high school. I love basketball. I love downhill skiing. My first Olympic dream was to be a downhill skier. We were on a ski trip. Lillehammer 94 Olympics was on TV and I was like, whoa, what is this? The Olympics. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. 2 years later, I'm watching the Atlanta Olympics with my sister. We're on the summer league swim team. I'm like, whoa, I want to be an Olympic swimmer. And I was already good at swimming. At that point, I was winning summer league teams, all this stuff. And I did a lot of sports until I was a freshman in high school. And I was deciding upon basketball or swimming. They were both this winter season. I said to my parents, maybe I'll do swimming one year and then basketball and then swimming and basketball. They said, no, you're at the point where decide one of them, commit to it and do the best of your abilities. And that was the first time I ever decided that I wanted to swim full on, like year round. I didn't even start doing morning practices and doubles till I was a junior in high school, which most people would think is like way too late to, start that. But like swimming, I love being in the water. It was medicinal for me. I had a natural affinity for like how to move through the water and understood that. I was really small my freshman year of high school and I looked at the potential of like, okay, swimming is here. I'm small. I've never really trained that much. And I get a lot of feedback that like people would say like, hey, you've got something special. People would tell my parents like, whoa, if Garrett ever went to practice, he'd be really great. we went down to Fort Lauderdale where my grandparents lived, and there was a guy Jack Nelson, only swimmer to ever swim in Olympics and be an Olympic head coach. And he's like, hey, there's something special about what Garrett has, even when I was in middle school. And I looked at my potential in basketball. I was like, I'm sure I'm on the B string. I love it, but that's probably never going to be something I can pursue, to a high level. So I committed to swimming. And then every time I went to practice, it's like I would just get better. I would learn more. It was just this snowball that kept building and moving faster.
Yeah. So let's just say I know what it feels like to be around, like go to a beach and be around water, or even to be close to my pool in my backyard and know the way water can kind of like cut through the world, like cut through stress or sort of be medicinal in a way. But what does it feel like? Like explain what it feels like to you to be a swimmer in the water all the time, move through the water. Like how does that do that for you?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it's the calming aspect of being on and around the water. And the second piece is I love just how the water feels moving around me and me moving through the water. Like you're not trying to force your way through the water. You're trying to like slip through the water as efficiently as you possibly can. And I love figuring out how you can change the angle of your hand or your elbow or your head and how it changes like your power. It's like, what it's like to do a bench press, and like the difference between if you have dumbbells, like what's this position feel like versus this, and you can get different power depending upon the position. Well, in swimming, I just kind of had a natural affinity of like, what positions can I put myself in to move through the water more effortlessly with more power and more speed. And the goal is to try and keep that going as long as you possibly can. And that just felt amazing. It's almost like a drug. It's like, when you go fast and you go best time, it's like this massive release of endorphins and whatever other chemicals are there. And I just love that and fed off of it all the time.
And that to you felt like it was sort of this natural ability, it sounds like, to understand your body in the water. It sort of came naturally to you. And it sounds like people saw that in you. And then you were sort of recognized it, as well. And then when it gets to like, so swimming, I don't understand swimming super well at the event level, because I never really swam beyond, doing my certification when I went to college so I could graduate at Notre Dame. But tell me about now events. So like you have this ability to do that. You're a learner, you're figuring it out, you're getting the feedback that you're good. And I know what that feels like too, when you're getting better every week, every day, and you sort of see what that looks like. You put in the work, you get better. It's intoxicating to go, let me do more of that because I can get better, right? But then how do you choose the events? Like, or do the events choose you?
I don't think you choose any event, right? It's like, I'm not a breaststroker because my ankles and my knees don't turn in the right way. I can't get the leverage on the water in the right way for my kick. You try, the 500 freestyle or the 50 freestyle or the 100 or the 200. And I was a 50, 100 guy who could do a good 200 and, be in the top, I don't know, 8 or 16 in the country. And you just kind of find your way there. I was originally a backstroker, actually. I was originally a butterflyer when I was really young, and then a backstroker through high school. And then when I came down to Texas, swim for Randy Reese, my junior year of high school, he identified me as a freestyler. I would never have made the Olympics as a backstroker. And so I had a good freestyle. I just didn't identify that was my special opportunity.
How did he identify that in a way that you didn't?
He just kind of could understand what he could see how I would move through the water and grip the water in ways that other people just didn't. And then I happened to be swimming for him at a time when, there were other Olympians on the team training with him when I was 16 years old. And I had a coach when I was even younger than that who said, everyone has something to teach you. Ask them what they're doing. Ask them to watch you underwater, above water, get video. How do you train? What do you eat the night before, race? What time do you go to sleep? And I just took all that in. That was one of my superpowers, is just like, I have zero apprehension about asking anyone anything. And I have zero ego to like go into a room and think that I know it all. Like, I'm happy to ask anyone for insight and feedback, and I'll try anything on. And that's what I did. And I just kept, getting better and learning, and that just kind of progressed in that way.
Yeah. And where does that come from? That willingness to do that? Where do you think have you always been that way since you were Garrett in, elementary school, or was that really cultivated through swimming and through your coaches?
I think it was just kind of always there. I just always really liked learning, and I always just knew there was a lot of opportunity to learn from other people and that I didn't know all the answers. Um, I mean, definitely was cultivated through that coach who said, hey, even the people who aren't as fast as you still have something to teach you. I remember my freshman year, this guy named Johnny, who was on the team, he was a junior. I was doing something on my breakout and freestyle and practice, and he said, hey, don't do this. That's, putting a lot of pressure on your face when you break out and is slowing you down, creating resistance. And, I was faster than him and everything, but like the mile at that point, but I was like, okay, let me try that. And sure enough, I just tried it and he was so right. And, that guy was never like amazing swimmer. He made the NCAAs a couple of times, but he was never a world-class swimmer, but there was still something for me to learn from him.
And that's incredibly powerful. I wonder if, I don't know that all athletes necessarily get that aha around that, but like, because in some ways it's very hierarchical, right? You're trying to establish yourself within the team. Your status is kind of like who's better than who. And I don't know that it's natural to go like, well, I can still learn from somebody who's sitting on the bench, or I can learn from somebody who maybe never played at my level. But if you transpose that to life, there's so many opportunities to learn something around you if you're just willing to be open to it. But I almost wonder, I don't know that that's that, like what you're describing, I don't know that it's that natural. Like I would say the top athletes are probably extreme learners, on some level, because you have to be in terms to break down the problem and solve the puzzle but willing to learn from everybody. I don't know. So I think that's a really important.
Learning is my second core value. So it's vitality, learning, freedom, and adventure, the core values I have as a person. I think it's like, what do you value more? Do you value like your ego more than learning? If so, then you're not going to ask the people. Like I really valued getting better. I really valued learning. I would say there was a big part of my career I didn't value everyone around me. Like I told people they should quit on the team when they weren't working hard, like you're wasting lane space. I was kind of ruthless in that way. And like sometimes regret. There's this guy who he couldn't do 25s underwater, and he just struggled so much. And this guy, all he talked about was he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I was like, you're never going to be a Navy SEAL. Like you should quit. Don't ever go for it. Like you should quit the team. Dude's been a Navy SEAL for like 10 years. And I don't know if I had anything to contribute to that. I'm still waiting for him to come to my door one night late at night and just like, get after me for all the, hell that I gave him. But yeah, I just loved learning and I just wanted to see how far I could go. And I knew that I had to leverage other people's know-how in ways that I didn't have.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up something earlier that I think is really interesting around benchmarking. So, one of the things that can be most stressful in sport as you're coming up and you're trying to, compete, succeed, ascend, is looking around and benchmarking, like the classic, comparison is the thief of joy kind of, but at some level it can be very distracting as an athlete. And then you talked about as a professional, you sort of benchmark what you're doing professionally in real life or post-competitive life to what swimming was like. So how do you reconcile, where does benchmarking or comparison have a role in any of this or not have a role in any of this?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. And you mentioned the Kazoo leaderboard. That wasn't, I think, helpful. And if I was leading a sales organization, I don't think I'd still put one of those on the board, because it's like, I think it's important for someone to look individually with their manager at what their goal is and where they're at and what are the things they can do to get to that better place. But I don't think it's super relevant to look at anything else anyone else is doing. I remember going to breakfast with Neil Walker in 2004 in the summer, like, what do you think the Stanford guys are doing? How are those guys training? He's like, forget about it. It's irrelevant. Like, the only thing that matters is what you're doing now. Aaron Pearsall said to me, I was like, hey, Aaron, how do I break to the next level? Like, I had gone to the world championships on relay. I was like, I want to be as good as you. I want to be, competing at the individual level at the world stage. He's like, just focus on what you're doing. Like, that's all you can control. Keep doing the right stuff that you're doing and you'll get there. And I did. And I'm, going through that with my son Gideon right now, who's about to turn 7. And, I watched this video of Gary Vee the other day, and he's like, for all the parents who, say it's okay when your kid, comes home and, from a little league game and they didn't win, it's like, I want to punch those parents in the face. I think he has it completely wrong. Like, I don't think winning is relevant at all for young kids. In fact, like some of the Scandinavian countries, they don't keep any score in kids' athletics until they're like 10 or 12. And if you look at, like, this is happening in the NBA a lot right now, which is if you look at the technique of the players who are coming from other countries, compare the technique developmentally of the Americans, the technique from Europe is so much better because in their practices, they focus on the technique and improving themselves. Like my son's Little League, they have practice, but they have games more than they have practice. And it's like the kids are out there, they can't hit, they can't throw, they can't catch. Why on earth are we having games? Makes no sense. Like, focus on the technique of how to like build rapport with someone and understand their needs and, you know, figure out how you can help them before focusing, you know, in a public way of like, you know, what's your number at this point.
Yeah.
And I did that in swimming. Like I would never look at, you know, the scoreboard of what other people went in the heats ahead of me. It's just not that relevant. Eddie Reese always said, like, the only thing that matters is that you're stronger right now than you were 6 months ago or you were last year, that your technique is better now than it was last season. Like everything else is unimportant.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I would imagine, again, if you're an athlete that's transitioning or in the middle of the transition or continuing the transition, first of all, if you've spent a decade post college or post that time of your life competing, give or take, you might feel behind, right? To peers, maybe friends that you had in high school or in college, or other people that you know. And that right out of the gate can put you in the wrong frame of mind. I'm a decade behind everybody. Maybe in some ways motivating or you know, gives you some energy, but like not healthy, right? And not relevant, right? Because if that's the standard, what you're describing, right? So like for you right now, what would you say is like, you know, the version of Garrett that's better 6 months from now than he is today? Where are you thinking about leaning into? Like what are you measuring for yourself personally around that?
I'm measuring a number of things physically, like how I feel in my training. I'm measuring just like the way that I'm contributing to the team up at Gather. I'm measuring like to the extent of which we're like kind of outsourcing what's happening on site and the performance of the site in terms of revenue that we're doing as a business, reviews that we're getting, which is telling us that we're giving our energy in meaningful ways to the team, like how many people are coming back. Like those are the things that I'm focused on that are not really my own metrics. They're the business's metrics that we all are contributing to and we talk about, but they're like team focus in a way. They're not individual focused. No one individual has any tie to any of those metrics or the things that we're doing. That's, I think, like the ultimate like frame for me. Like winning, there's a place for it. You know, the Navy SEALs talk about it pays to be a winner. Yeah, of course it pays to be a winner. Thing people ask me about what does being an Olympic gold medalist do for you? It's like it opens basically any door you want for like 15 minutes or 5 minutes. That's what it does. It pays to be a winner because people know that you can commit and that you can work hard and that you can create some type of result. So there is an aspect of like, sure, Gary Vee is right at a certain age. And like when my son is 12 or 13 or 14, I'll be like, yeah, you know, like it does pay to win in some ways. But I'm focused more on like contributing to others and creating value for others now more than just like contributing to myself. Cause I realize it's just not a great, you know, cycle to live in.
Yeah. 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 Well, how much do you think about, like, again, the values that you shared with earlier? So it's vitality,
learning, freedom and growth, adventure.
Yeah. So how much do you touch back on those and reflect on that or use that to guide you? Like in what ways do you do that in relation to all of this?
I mean, vitality, I use it all the time. Like, am I training? What am I eating? How do I feel? I mean, for a while I was doing that NutriSense, you know, where it tracks your glucose and figuring out how that made me feel, tracking my sleep, using the Whoop, understanding, you know, what that's like. I mean, learning, like, what are the things I'm learning? How can I use those to improve my marriage, my relationship with my kids, you know, my business, learning about myself? I'm still untangling so many things from my childhood, my time in swimming. I mean, freedom is really important to me. I never wanted to feel like I was constrained. If you've done any Enneagram stuff, like I'm a 7, and 7s want, to go and do a lot of fun things. Like they're terrified of being constrained or put in a hole. Like freedom is really important to me. And for me, like those are in that order. Like I have to have vitality where I can't fully learn. If I can't have freedom unless I'm learning a ton, and I can't have the adventure unless I have the freedom to go pursue adventure in the ways that I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so we talked about before the conversation about sort of the elements of swimming that gave you a set of experiences and a set of skills and cultivated you in a way that allows you to be successful kind of post swimming, right? And those are some of the things we've talked about in terms of what swimming brought out in you and how it gave you energy, and what you do uniquely, let's say, better than other people, or that you can uniquely contribute. And one of the things that I didn't realize that you highlighted was just the importance of you being able to contribute at an individual level and make that impact, but also do it as part of a team. I think that's a pretty important learning, because there are a lot of professions that people can choose where they can go in a hole and have their head in a computer or in research for 8 hours and not have to do that. But if someone's wired to need that, it'd be good to know in advance. And you talked a little bit about, trying and testing and experiencing a lot of things. And I think that's all really good and healthy. There's some part of me that, as I've watched athletes make the transition, it's like, well, if you could just spend a little less time doing that, so like to some degree, or at least find that sweet spot sooner, you might be able to get on that path sooner. And that doesn't mean hitting an easy button on anything, but I do think recognizing those kind of nuances can help you maybe choose some things that are more aligned versus less aligned, right? To maybe give you a quicker path. But I'm curious about, you mentioned like unpacking, or what are the things you had to unlearn? Like you've had to, again, someone used this phrase earlier around Navy SEALs actually being institutionalized and some of the challenges around that experience as a Navy SEAL. And I think I've never used that phrase to describe being kind of an elite level athlete, but I definitely see it as a mold. Like you're kind of molded and shaped by what you do every day, like those habits, right, become who you are, and the feedback you get from the world and what people expect of you inevitably just sort of moves edges around you into a certain mold. And then it's hard to break out of that mold, because that's what gave you energy in the end and then what you get feedback for. So I'm curious for you, like, what is it that you've had to shave off or go, hey, I need to unlearn that thing, or I need to unpack that stuff from swimming because actually it's not as helpful, as I'm on this next leg of the journey. What are some of those things?
Yeah. Selfish. I mean, I didn't think I ever had a big ego, but like I was definitely, not selfish in a kind of nasty way, but like I had dreams, and when I needed to go to bed, I was going to bed. Like if like people wanted to go out to dinner, it's like, if it wasn't in a place where I felt it was the type of fuel that I could eat when I was training, I just wouldn't go, or I would steer the, group to going to some place that I could go. And I realized like after the fact, I had some, not eating disorders, but like there is some eating disorder, that I forget what it's called, but like you have a real apprehension that like only certain foods are healthy for you. So there was a period of time where like the only place I would go out to eat was Casa de Luz. Like that's it. I would cook everything because I had to control what I wanted. But I think like being selfish with like my own dreams and goals, and I've had to unpack this really in an intense way, and it's provided challenge with me in my marriage and my relationship with some close people, is I can still get caught up in Garrett's dreams, Garrett's goals. It was a rude awakening to me. I finished acting, I got married, and I realized like, oh, my wife has goals and dreams too. There's things she wants to get out of life. It's not just like Garrett's world that everyone's revolving around. And that was a big challenge for me. It wasn't just my schedule. I mean, that in and of itself, that one thing, if you can untangle that and realize it's not just all about you, that's a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Because to be successful at that level, it is revolving around what you need, when you need it, and what you need to do. What else? Just before we go there on that, like, so what have you done to I guess soften the edges around that or create more space outside of that? Like, how do you work on that?
I've been kicked in the face a bunch, and in relationships. I mean, I've done a bunch of coaching. I've done, gone to therapy about it. I've talked to a bunch of people that I care about, mentors. I journal about it. I've kept a journal for years, figuring out things about myself. I ask, my son is 7, almost 7, and he has incredible insights. Like, he's unadulterated, he's got insights. You ask him questions, he, has ideas of, what to do. And a lot of times it's beautiful wisdom that we should know, but inherently we don't. I think they still have their inner voice is just so strong. They haven't been curbed by, traditional school or, a lot of these things. But it's taken me a while and I still don't have, the best answer. Bob has helped me a lot. But yeah, I'm still working on it.
Yeah. What else comes to mind? Any other areas that you've kind of worked on shaping?
Yeah. I think being softer, I was pretty ruthless. I think that was one of my superpowers in swimming and in sports. Like, I just was really great at, dealing with pain and challenge and a tough schedule. And in the 100 freestyle, one of the reasons I was so good is I was just, really capable at the end of a race with not only like dealing with the pain, but like pushing harder into it. There's a great coach, Mike Bottom, many-time Olympic coach. I was at a swim camp with him when I was young, maybe 13, 14 years old. Someone says, what's the separates the good swimmers from the great swimmers? He said, the good swimmers, every race has a point in it where it gets really hard. And that's true in every journey in life. He's like, the good swimmers, they say, oh shit, and they let off the gas, or they keep the gas pedal there. The great swimmers, they stomp down on the gas at that point when it gets super hard, and that's when they charge forward. And then they like, well, how do you do that? And he said, you visualize that moment over and over and over again. What are you going to be feeling? What are you going to be thinking? What's your stomach going to feel like? What are you be telling yourself? And I would visualize that every single night for years when I went to bed over and over and over. So I would anticipate that moment coming. And I developed this just like, fearlessness for that moment. And I like, that was, one of the things I think about, like, what was my superpower in swimming, but what is my superpower in an environment? And you saw this at Kazoo, like, remember that connect and sell day? It's like, I can push the energy and like help people rise to a new level. And I was really good at that in swimming in the pool of just like pushing the level of output of the entire group to a new level. And that was one of the things Eddie Reese did a great job of, is getting the right people in the pool so that like you give them a set, you give them an opportunity, and they just push the bar up higher and higher because they're feeding off of each other. And Gather Campground is a perfect example. Like, I humbly say, like, I have created the culture there. I have set the standard. I continue to inspire and push our team to like do more and over deliver for our guests. And that experience and that energy is felt by our guests. And you can see the reviews of what our guests have experienced. And so you mentioned, like, how do you get to try a bunch of things and get to that earlier? I think there's tasting and trying and hopefully finding something earlier. And then it's also like, what superpowers do you have that were evident in training and athletics? And how do you reapply those in a way that is suitable for life after sports, which means it can't be super self-focused. It has to contribute to other people, not just of yourself. There are a whole bunch of things on that list. I don't even know all of them at the top of my head.
Yeah. But it's interesting with Gather, because I was kind of, I've seen you bring this alive.
Yeah.
The concept, you and your partners, and then was doing a little research, kind of looking at the website, hearing you talk about it. It's like the attention to detail and the intentionality around putting the puzzle of that experience together. You could just see through and through.
Yeah.
And I remember when you came to Kazoo, I probably said to a couple of people there, probably Paul, the CEO, and some other people, like, this is what world-class looks like. Like, because it's not there every day in a general environment like that.
Yeah.
But this is what world-class looks like. It's paying attention to the details. It's fully being intentional about every moment and every situation of trying to figure out how to make the most of it. And so I can see that world-classness come out in what you guys are trying to do there, right? Like that attention, that commitment, like that intentionality. I think that's super cool. Do you feel like there's an element like with Gather, like, do you feel like you're back in the water when you're working on Gather? What feels closer to swimming and what feels further away when you're working?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm closer to being in the water. I just feel like I'm in my element. I get so much energy when I'm working with someone and helping them have an amazing experience and over delivering on their expectations. I get so much energy when people come in there like, whoa, I never expected to come in here and, be offered a free drink and be, told like, hey, there's this great event happening tonight that we can go to. And hey, we'll, order tickets for you. Those types of things. I love being there with the team and seeing people to be fulfilled in the role that they have, feel like they're on the team, feeling what they have in their role, they have ownership over. And we have teammates there who like act as if the place is theirs, that they own, that they have zero ownership in. And I think that's the ideal scenario, like inspire people to the fact that like they feel like they have ownership and they get to use their best skills and contribute to something that's bigger than themselves. That's, I think, the ideal, thing that you can do. And I'm in a really intense period of learning, which is we're trying to maximize that property and we're trying to stabilize it and we're trying to refinance it and basically take out more debt on it and keep at a lower interest rate and keep the payments the same. And that's really a pressure point for me personally, because that's not how my brain would have worked. My brain would have been like, no, let's pay off as much debt as we possibly can, refinance with a lower interest rate, and then we'll be able to have more cash flow. And so one of our partners, he's just a master at like thinking about problems and the guest experience, but just like how to create a model that you can then expand and take to a much bigger platform. And I'm learning so much from him, and I know that I'm in the right spot because a lot of these learnings are uncomfortable for me. They push me, they make me think about them on the car ride home. I stopped listening to podcasts and books on tape because like I'm just trying to get a sense of where do I feel these things in my body. Like I'll sit for 50 minutes because Gather's 50 minutes from my house. Like I'll have a conversation with our partner about this topic and I'll just sit in silence for the whole ride home and just let it like be in my body and be in my brain and let whatever comes out, come out. Because one of the things I realized is I think as a culture, I'll just speak for myself, like we're constantly putting inputs in that block us understanding what actually is in us and how to, fully manifest that and express that in the world. And if you look at a lot of these chefs, they go around and they see what other people are doing, and then they come back to their environment and they sit in silence and they sit in their kitchen and they like creatively come up with what is possible here with what I have without putting too many inputs in. It's like putting in as few of inputs as possible to make the most beautiful thing as the output.
Yeah. That's super, super powerful. It's like, it reminds me of the benefit of even traveling alone. I don't know if you've ever gone on a significant like trip by yourself.
Yeah.
But when you've done that, it's amazing what you hear from yourself that you never heard or didn't realize was inside of you, because most interactions are in relation to someone else or someone else's, dialogue. So it makes me think of that as well. Now, is that a relatively new?
Yeah, it's new. I mean, I've listened to so many podcasts and so many books, and it's like, I think there are just periods where it's good to just get silent. Like I was talking to my mother-in-law a couple weeks ago and she said, sometimes the opportunity is just to be still. Just be silent, be still, see what's there, internalize it, untangle it in your brain, see where you feel it in your body. And I've probably gotten away from that in a lot of ways, trying to just, we do all sorts of things, music, drugs, coffee, whatever it might be, CBD, all these different things people use to mask what they're feeling inside. And I think a lot of times we're scared of what we feel inside and we're just trying to get away from that. But only until we go into our own self and do the work and like sit with those feelings and those emotions and those feelings, I think, can we fully then, we have to be the apprentice of our own self, right? And then we have to like figure out how do we express that, creatively in a world that brings us energy, that the world gives us energy for. And then, ideally, maybe we can strive towards mastery, in our own life. And that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I want to live a beautiful life, and I want to do it in keeping with my values. Bob, he's probably said to you, like, the time people get in challenge most professionally and personally is when they're living and working outside of or in, conflict with their values. And so I'm trying to say, hey, here are my values, and testing, like, are the things I'm doing living within those values or not? And if they're not, I need to change something.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I wonder too, if that's a important thing to cultivate post some type of athletic career, because you do have so many inputs coming at you as an athlete. And sometimes you even rely on those inputs someone's doing your training schedule for you every day, right?
Yeah.
Someone might be scheduling your meals for you every day. You know what it was like to be an athlete at UT, and we were both in that environment. Like, there's a lot being done for those student athletes every single day that they don't have to think about. And now you have to be more self-sufficient and more self-reliant, and maybe allow more of the answers to come from within rather than from the external outputs. That's why I was interested if this is sort of like a relatively newer, kind of understanding for you of what's important for you to reach your own personal potential and insight.
Yeah, for sure it's newer. I mean, in some ways, like Eddie Reese was definitely always against people having coffee and listening to music on decks between meets. It's like his whole thing was, don't listen to music before you race. Allow the energy in the room and the energy within yourself guide the experience. You don't want to rely on anything else. Just take whatever is there and internalize that energy and internalize everything that you've brought to this starting block, and then you perform. And that's, what I'm trying to bring to this current just like phase for the next few weeks or month of just how do I internalize and how do I dissect the things that are going on inside me to its best, and highest expression and value in this current phase that I'm in. And I'll be in a different phase in, a week or a day or a month.
It almost seems like for Gather, super relevant too, because it's a space as much as it's anything else.
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
Set of spaces.
Yeah.
And spaces have noises, they have sounds, they have smells, they have energy or not energy, right? So to be in that state of mind probably is useful to get connected more deeply with what the environment feels like, right?
And that space, I mean, we talk about athletics. It was easy. You go into UT, all the spaces are the best. The people are often the best, the coaches, the support staff, the team. I've struggled to want to recreate that. And I've basically come to this realization that I will never create the UT swimming environment again, where you have the best coaches in the world and you have people who are truly the best in the world, who are oftentimes world records in the same pool, striving for the same thing. It's just a super rare deal. And so it's like, what is the next environment you want to create like that? And some of the environment things that you can, contribute to, and some of the environments just exist. One of the things I had a challenge with after swimming is, you're right, I went from having my coach articulate every single set. You're the athlete, there's a coach. But then oftentimes when you finish, you have to be the athlete and the coach.
Yeah.
You have to take on a whole other job. Who knows how to do that?
Totally.
That's where the master, that's where the sensei, that's where the entrepreneur, the mentor, or the Tony Capasso that you go work for at a sales organization, that's where they come in to play and are so important.
Yeah. Well, and maybe, so I was going through what we were kind of unpacking together. So it's like, find a mentor, kind of a leader, right, to follow, try and test a lot of things. You talked about earlier the importance of kind of really leaning in, I think. I don't know if you use that phrase exactly, but sort of leaning into those, like to the qualities that you have and really leaning into that. But I wonder if also like the benefit of, the thing that you described about that environment is it's a team around of people, right? And some of that team is working on setting that environment, right down to like, if this was, the soccer stadium at UT, like someone's cutting the grass and making sure that, right. All the way to like the trainers, to the athletic staff, so maybe there's also an element here of like, beyond the mentor set of mentors, is there like a Formula One pit crew to put around this to kind of help you sort of, you're not trying to build the same team, you're trying to build the team that you need to support you on that next journey. And maybe in some ways, the way that you selected your partners, from what you already described, like different skill sets between you and your partners. And that's a version of putting a team around. How else do you think about that? Like for you personally, like, is there more to that for you? Like, got individual mentors, you've got some teammates you've selected. Are there other people around your life that you intentionally cultivate or put around?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing that comes up to my mind is like, what team are you trying to, like, what is the purpose of the team? Like, what is the team trying to, accomplish together? I think like that's important from a business sense, from a life sense. Like, what are you trying to, do or be in this life, and who can help you with that? Stephen Tomlinson has helped me in ways that my wife can't, or my dad can't. My wife helps me in ways that you can't. I mean, like my aunt always said, like, we actually need like multiple wives or marriages, because like Kara can't provide me every single thing. Like you need multiple people on your team to provide you different things, and you want to provide different things to people as well. I just kind of look at where are the places I need help now and who can I get help from. I mean, you introduced me to Bob. I needed some help, kind of thinking through my thoughts and like, diagnosing some of those or untangling some of those. It's no different than like, oh, my back's hurting, my groin's hurting. I need to go to Dr. Bob. I need to go to Mark Frazier. I mean, there's like, for Gather, there's a, real estate mentor in terms of like when we want to go buy more properties. There's a financing mentor. There's a guest experience mentor. There's a staffing, how do you build the right team mentor. I mean, thankfully, my partners, they embody a lot of those different things. And I've been really intentional about like who of the people around me would show up to my funeral. Like who are the people who really care deeply about me that they would, I don't know, walk 30 miles to help me. Like, Hugh is someone, it's like, if I had to think of, a short handful of people on my deathbed who I would hope would be there, like Hugh is one of them. Like, who are the people that are just going to make you feel safe and secure and, like just fully okay in who you are and that you're a beautiful person? Those are the types of people I think you want to surround yourself with. And also like, what are their values? Running with a bunch of people who, need to drive a Ferrari to make them still feel good and live in a mansion in Westlake. Like, I'm sure there are people that I can derive value from. And one of our partners lives in a mansion in Westlake. That's not super important to him. That was a creative expression for him. It doesn't create, the person he is. It's like, yeah, what are the values? Eddie Reese, he and I shared a lot of the same values. Yeah. Contributing to people, caring for people. He always said, care for yourself, care for other people, and the rest will take care of itself.
Yeah. Well, so to bring it full circle, you said part of that transition is you got to stay the athlete in many ways, but you also got to become the coach.
Yeah.
What does a coach do? Well, coach puts a great team together.
Yeah.
And then the point is, well, what sport are you playing? Like to what end?
Yeah.
Right? Like what, and I would maybe argue that if we go back to what you mentioned about Bob and what he might've shared, is you're going to be your best self if you're living in concert with your values. So you're trying to put a team together that can help you live as close to your values as you can. And well, what does that look like for you? Well, for vitality, you need people who can keep you healthy and strong. And right. For learning, you need people who can push you, challenge you, teaching you things. For freedom, you probably need people who aren't going to get in the way of allowing you to express yourself. And for adventure, well, there's probably people that you're going on an adventure with that if you didn't have them around, you wouldn't be able to do that, right? Yeah. So if you can do those things, that's the team you're trying to put around you. And if you don't pick the right team, you may have a cancer in the locker room, right? You may have people who aren't good at their position. Yeah. And I have some friends that would even take it a step further and go like, no, every single person on my team, which is in their close group of friends and relationships, have to be world-class, and to them, their definition of the world-class of that could be the level of integrity that those people have, or their own personal commitment to the kinds of things you're talking about, like, how committed are they as a friend? How committed to learning are they? How much does integrity matter to them? So on and so forth. So I think that's super, super interesting. So what is it? What is it, the thing about these transitions, given your own personal experience in having cultivated a community around this with After the Finish Line? What is it people don't realize is either going to happen or is happening to them in that transition that they also need to wrestle with?
That you have to be able to provide some type of value to another person. Great, you are an Olympic gold medalist swimmer, you've broken world records, and like to go into a company and get hired, someone has to be hiring you to do a specific job, not just because you've worked hard and you're a good person and you want to be great. Like, I think a lot of athletes get tripped up because they were at the height of the mountain and they just don't want to go back to the base camp. But I don't know another way around it. Like, unless you're just going to use your, like, sure, there are guys who've been, like Emmett Smith, evidently he's a big real estate guy. Like, he was super known. So he used his notoriety and then got in deal flow and could raise money easily for real estate deals. So like, cool, he pieced those pieces together. But like, he still kind of started at the bottom of like, he had to create the deal flow and he had to create the money flow, and then he had to start doing deals. When you were, leaving soccer, like you started Bizarre Voice, right? Like you started kind of at the bottom of the sales totem pole probably, and then you became at the top of the sales totem pole, and you continued to rise, and now you're teaching other people and leading other people how to be, great leaders and sales leaders. I just don't know any other way around it other than like being willing to start over and being willing to go through the challenge. And part of the thing is like that early phase of learning, we did as kids in sports, and it was fun and our friends were there, and none of it felt like work. It didn't feel like work until later on. And for some of us, it never felt like work. And so to like go and do that hard work on something you're not sure you're in love with or want to be doing is really challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the hardest part. Well, one, the beauty is you don't have to start at square one or at zero on all of it.
Right.
You may have to start on the sport specific part of it,
right,
or in this case, the profession specific part where you're going into apprenticeship on learning a particular profession. But the other skills that you have, the other qualities that you have, you may be light years ahead of other people. Like again, you came into Kazoo with very little enterprise sales experience, right? But your qualities in being able to ask the right questions, be Socratic, be able to break down a problem and learn quickly was unmatched, right?
Yeah.
Well, because you're coming from an environment that a lot of folks that were there, frankly, had never experienced and didn't even know what that looked like, right? On some level. So that's the upside to that. And I went through that same journey, which is getting out of coaching, trying and testing a few things, being, the executive director of a nonprofit, getting the financial services business, and finally looking at startup tech as like, I think there's something here that I can really contribute and that feels like sport and play to me more so than these other things.
Yeah.
But the hardest part about that, honestly, and I'm curious your take on this, because I did talk to someone else about this, is being able to articulate that. So like, okay, you have a set of skills and a set of capabilities that have been built up through sport. There's some interesting things you want to try and test and get access to, but like getting people to take that shot on you when you don't have the experience, how did you resolve some of that through that journey of trying to connect? Does that make sense? Because it wasn't easy for me to get into Bizarre Voice.
Yeah.
A lot of people had a lot of doubt, well, you'd never done this before.
Right.
I know you did some interesting things, and clearly you're a leader and clearly you're capable of the things that we've talked about, but you've never done this.
Yeah.
I
mean, network is a piece of it for sure. I think like you can leverage your network, and you said that about if you, link up with a great leader and they believe in you and they start believing, then you'll have access to that network. I don't know. You just got to go for it, right? Like you went for it, Bizarre Voice, and you proved it, and you were willing to work, and then all of a sudden good things happen. And Eddie Reese always said, if you're willing to work and, commit, as long as you're patient, good things will always happen. Like it's always going to happen. I think that's probably right on. And I remember sitting on the, awards podium at the Olympics, and people said like, oh yeah, what did that feel like? And it was like, wow, the hard work and the dedication always pay off if you're willing to be patient. That's what I felt in that moment. You just have to be willing to like go through that again after the sports journey. And a lot of people are just not willing to go through that period, and press through that hard, challenging time. And I'm in it again, honestly. Like we're at the beginning of Gather. Like I'm at the bottom of the mountain again. There are big guys in our space that we're trying to reinvent. And here I am, like on our first property 3.5 months in.
So what does being patient mean to you? Like describe that. Like there's patience, which any of us who've competed and succeeded and tried it, like I don't have that much patience. Like I want to get there now.
Yeah.
But what does being patient mean to you? Like
it's learning the technique, right? Like I want the second Gather. We're just not there yet. Like I have to be patient enough to be able to look honestly and soberly at myself and say like, do we really know the techniques well enough to be able to go and do it again?
Yeah.
It's like a qualifier, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, are you good enough? Do you understand the puzzle well enough to go to the next level of competition? Like, or not? And if the answer is no, like you got to be patient and stick with the game and like be just like articulate of like, what are the metrics or what are the things that we need to do in order to get to that? Like in swimming, there are times, like time standards. Do you have the standard or not to compete at this next level or no? Like if the answer is no, somehow you either have to like be patient joyfully or like be patient in a like unhappy, nasty way. And I just don't know that anything great happens in the latter. It's like,
Yeah.
you got to find joy in just like sticking in the moment where you're at, even though it's tough and painful and you might be scared. But the alternative is like finding joy in being in this moment and just saying like, here I am. Like, this is beautiful. This is for me. Like everything that's happening right now is for me. Being on this, conversation with you is for me. It's helping me articulate things. Like I've been in bad places in my marriage. Like it's for me. It's helping me learn things and articulate things about me that have been challenging in my past that I'm trying to change. Like I've had businesses that were not good. I've had, I left Kazoo and I went to something that didn't work. This is for me. And the skills that I learned in all those things are contributing to what I'm doing now. And it's like, can you be patient long enough? It's like, okay, cool. It took me 10 years to find swimming and like really commit to it. It's taking me 10 years to find this thing. I was patient and impatient on the road, but like, what other choice do we have? Like you can't make someone fall in love with you. You can love yourself and you can give love and you can be patient and see where that manifests. But like, I just don't know what other choice you have to be patient. Like I can't just manifest the second property, tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's going to come when it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super interesting because, in some ways when we're competing, there is a bit of a clock because your age is not on your side as years go on, right? That at some point there's going to be a decline. So I felt a lot of that stress. Soccer is also a big sport. I don't know if swimming is quite in the same category, maybe gymnastics, but a lot of people talk about if you haven't done this by this age, then you're behind. And you already talked about earlier, being a junior, doubling down in swimming felt like behind, right? So inevitably there's a clock, and there's a clock in the game, there's a clock on the, but I've always felt like there's two things, like the superpower of just like when I felt at my best in sport, it was like, I can go all day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want this practice to end.
Totally.
I can go all day.
Yeah.
And don't blow the whistle because I want to keep playing, right? Like don't blow if there's practice, do not blow that whistle.
Yeah.
Like we're going to keep competing, And I remember that in business, it was like, I can do this all day. But like this is what we get trained to do, which is if you want to go, we'll go. Like we'll compete, we'll go hard. And like your point about getting into that zone, you kind of get trained to relish, like we can keep going because that it's going to be a bit of a war of attrition somewhere in this thing. Someone's going to be willing to do more things. But I think to get to the side that you're talking about, you also have to have the humility that like, yes, you've accomplished some things, but no one owes you anything today. They may have owed you something yesterday, but even then you're only as good as your last game or your last race or, look, there was Olympics you didn't qualify for, right?
Two of them.
Right. Two of them. Right. So there is this element of like this humility to say like, hey, I have to keep earning it and keep earning it. And I have to recognize what I don't know, what I'm not good at, what I haven't experienced yet. But yeah, I think there's just a lot made out of the clock and out of time, and it's going to take what it's going to take.
There's no other way around it. Like you wanting to keep going, whether you're in like a, in business or in soccer, like I'd argue that has actually nothing to do with the competition. Yeah. It has to do with the fact that you found your spot where you're fully expressing yourself, where you're learning, where you're, doing the thing that you love to do at a high level. And that's what's exciting. Like, sure, you might be competing against another company to get this sale, but I think what you're really excited about is the fact that you're moving the levers, you're playing with the puzzle, you can see how you're putting it together. You're excited about, the positioning that you have that you think is really special about this. And you don't want that to end. You're excited in this game because you're in flow with your teammates and you're passing amazing and you're scoring and you feel good for some reason, your muscles and your heart and all that just is popping that day. And you're not fatigued. So you just wanted to keep going. And that has everything to do with you and nothing to do with anyone else.
No, it's just being in that flow state of like, thriving in that environment of the conditions. Yeah. And knowing that you're trying to navigate those conditions with the full breadth of and depth of your skill set. Yeah. Right.
And you can't force that. Stephen Tomlinson told me, he's like, you're really good at forcing results. And for a while, like I was, like I kind of muscled my way through athletics and swimming in a lot of ways. Like I could just like, force results. And I think I was always a master at figuring out how to get the most out of my body on any specific day, whether that was, a win or breaking American or world record, or it was just like getting 8th place and not making the Olympic team, whatever it was. But like, how can we like allow things to ensue instead of pursue them, ensuing them because of we've found ourselves in the place where we've worked on our technique and we've, learned how to be in an environment and how to contribute to other people. And then we find ourselves, because we're patient in this opportunity, like gather ensued. I like pursued it. Like I had written it down, I had drawn about it, and I had articulated and envisioned it. But like, I can't force the results, just get into a partnership with someone. Like I'm getting into partnerships because of like who I am. They want to be in partnerships with me. It's not just because like I'm forcing some result on to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, we were talking earlier about the things you have to unlearn or unwind from those elite competitive experiences and molding. And I think one of the things for me that's been a big aha in my own journey, but also watching other people do it, is when you're competing, you put the work in, you're willing to do more than other people are willing to do, and you will get disproportionate outcomes. It's a little more direct in the effort and feedback loop of that. But in real life, you're potentially dealing with more forces and more dynamics and more people. It's not just you in the lane or you and one or two other competitors around you. There's actually multiple objectives, getting your own personal health right, having your family, be a loving environment in place, right? Being connected to your community and friendships, right? You go down the list of things that are important to you. And how are you going to force it? Getting business deals done? Like, good luck with that. Like force the deal to get done.
Yeah.
Like, it takes two to tango. And that other person, actually, the more force you put, the more likely they are to run the other direction.
Yeah.
Versus that person to have the option on the playing field. They had to either step up and compete or get run over, So I think to me that's the one area that I think is worth thinking a lot about is like the art of not forcing, essentially, I guess is, I listen to a lot of Alan Watts and the Eastern philosophy, Chinese phrase of Wu Wei. It's like, how do you, put up a sail instead of rowing and putting oars in the water? Or if you're going to cut wood, cut with the grain, not against the grain. That is not the thing that's naturally trained into you as an athlete. You sort of like hit things head on and you row like hell. Right. And you'll get there versus like, why don't we just put up a sail here and maybe we can get there faster and easier, and maybe with less carnage, know, I don't know if.
Well, and this, like, I watched this video, I'm sure you've seen this or of this, but like Messi, I saw this video of him and it's like the whole game is just like going crazy.
Yeah.
And he's just walking, he's watching the game. He's literally walking around the field and then he sprints for like 10 yards and something happens and then he passes and someone passes him and he scores again. It's like, he's not forcing himself into situations. Obviously, he knows the environment so well, and he knows, in my opinion, not being a soccer player, he understands where he can contribute and how he fits into that, whatever is going on the field. And it's like, you can't force yourself into a specific situation, but it seemed like he was finding himself in situations. He was witnessing what was happening on the field, and like that's what I think we all want to do. Like, find ourselves in situations because we understand the environment and we see what's going on and we know how we uniquely can contribute to that environment.
Yeah, maybe in some ways it's like that phrase of like letting the game come to you. Like again, I've seen some of those videos and a lot of that dialogue around Messi. And then there's actually George Mumford. Did we read his book together?
Yeah.
The Mindful Athlete.
Yeah, we did.
This guy already came out. So he did a lot of mindfulness with Kobe and Michael Jordan and whatnot. And his main coaching to them was to score 60 or 70 points in a game. You have to let the game come to you. You can't go force it to score 60 or 70. And I think in Kobe's last game at 60, he scored 60, right? And he talked about just letting the game come to him. And see, that may be an interesting insight in terms of athletes making the transition, because sometimes I see athletes approaching this try and test phase with the same freneticism of the sport. And so it's like, well, I'm just going to go after this with the same full force. And I say freneticism because a lot of sports are pretty frenetic. It could be football, volleyball, a lot of action, a lot of people running into each other, a lot of transition, and in some ways that's just taking what we learned in the sport and applying it. Like me as a center midfielder in soccer to do what Messi did, never. Like, I didn't know how to do that. I assumed that the way I was going to have my impact on the game was to run around like hell and bump into people and wreak havoc and then find ways to like feed other people the ball. You know, I was too afraid to do that. Like what if it didn't happen? Right. What if I didn't touch the ball but twice in the first half, you know? And so that's also like worth thinking about and meditating on, is like actually doing less to do more post, because again, you just don't get trained to do that as an athlete. Do every single thing, figure out every single detail.
More reps.
Do more reps, one more rep, do this, train here, train there, train 6 hours, train 8 hours. Well, when you only have one thing to do, that can work. But now it's like, oh, I want to maintain friendships. I want to have a family and a significant other. I want to, you know, stay close to my faith and whatever. Well, when you're approaching it with that same level of freneticism on the one thing, and then it's likely that it'll be elusive because the conditions are different. I've thought a lot about that in particular. I'm really curious, like, of all the experiences you've had in competing, is there any one experience that's like maybe one of the most formative for you and like who you are today, something you experienced or went through?
Oh yeah. I was a freshman in high school and we were at a sectional meet in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. There was this guy named Pat and he was like a great freestyler. He was, you know, I guess better than me at the time just because his times were faster. And I was competing against him in the 100 freestyle. And I remember at the 75, I pushed off and I saw him ahead of me and there was something that just clicked in me. And I was like, no, like, I'm going to get this guy. And then I just went crazy that last 25 and I got him and I beat him. And that was the first time like this idea really clicked in my head, which is like, you can go to this other level. Like there's a whole other realm you can go to if you're willing to sacrifice and you're willing to endure and you're willing to just, you know, allow the pain to be there and recognize it and honor it and not allow it to control you or stop you for what you're doing. And that impacted everything else I did after that. Like it took me to a new level and in my training, in my competition. I mean, all the way to, you know, the big races that I was in at the Olympics or at the NCAAs, whatever it might be, like that experience really changed me. And it's brought me into, you know, a new level of how I, you know, contribute in the professional world too. Like there have been many scenarios where I'm like, no, guys, like we're not going home now. Like we haven't even begun, you know, we're not close to doing what we can do. I mean, I remember that day at Kazoo with Connect and Cell, like I think I made like 769 dials that day, you know, and it was like, there were some people who were like afraid to get on or they wouldn't. I was like, guys, this is the opportunity. Here we are. We got this thing. Like press go. You know, here's the opportunity for us to see what is possible for you. And there's like that other level that was unlocked for me in that experience. And then just testing that over and over. And that made just the world of impact for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in many ways, it sounds like that kind of brought you back to, like you talked about earlier, the influence that you can have in a team and that you look to have in a team, but also it brought out of you this opportunity to go maybe for a bit of adventure, to go like, let's see what's possible here. And I know we can, like, this is an opportunity to get an unlock and to go to the next level. And you seize that opportunity because you saw it. No, I think that's super powerful. So if you were sitting here then, okay, with Garrett 10 years ago, I'm Garrett 10 years ago with a full head of hair.
That would have been
Yeah. What is the advice you're giving him before, like, as he's writing that letter, you know, waking up the next morning, thinking about what to do next, maybe has some ideas around athletic foodie? Not that you would do anything different, maybe you would or you wouldn't, but what would be, you put your arm around him and you're like, all right, dude, here's what I want you to understand about the next decade.
What are your values? What were your values in swimming? What did you really care about? Why were you doing it? Like really figure out how to articulate that. And what were the components that made you really successful in swimming? Like it was great coaches. It was having something I really loved doing that I wanted to pursue. It was having great teammates. And I valued improvement over anything at all costs. And that's just how I, you know, pursued it. And when I realized at the Olympics, it wasn't really about the Olympic gold medal. It never was. Like, I never look at it. I never think about it. It's not really relevant to me at all. I remember the things that I did, the people I was with, the events that we went to, and figure out what your values are now and like, what do you really think success is? Not being attached to what you think the world wants you to believe success is. Like, what does Garrett actually think success is going to look like for him? And I was jaded by, a lot of things in our culture of wanting money or wanting prestige or thinking that that was really what was important to like, completing me or making me feel worthy. And I would just tell Garrett of 10 years ago, like, hey, just get really sure of what you think your values are and just patiently go after things that are in alignment with those values, not worrying about whether or not you're going to achieve some prize or you're ever going to outdo the Olympic gold medal or you're going to become rich or you're going to become famous or, any of those things, because those aren't super important. And I've done a good job of that. But I think like I've definitely gone after some things because, of money or because I wanted to like sell a business because that would finally make me feel like I was smart enough to do it, because I grew up with a learning disability and, had challenges in traditional school. And then the Acton MBA was like so fitting for me because it was super tactile and it was Socratic and you can engage in the discussion. And that was perfect for me. That's what I would tell myself.
Yeah. That's super cool and spot on. And then part of it is like, well, what can we learn from this? That it's not to short circuit or help people get somewhere faster. It's to just find alignment, faster, more efficiently. Like why waste time misaligned? And I think what you've highlighted is it starts understanding your values and like what it is that you're playing for, what it is that you value. And the sooner you can understand that, or at least spend time thinking about it, articulating, even evolving it over time, the sooner you can get to a place, right? Probably that.
You said something there, I think like, hopefully everyone can ask themselves, like, what are you playing for?
Yeah.
My opinion on most athletes is like they're playing for something that's filling a hole within themselves. And I remember Ian Crocker said to me one time, he was like, yeah, most of the Olympic team, people at the highest level, like they're really fucked up. And I like kind of took offense to that because like at that point I was like kind of the world championship team. He's like, yeah, we're all kind of fucked up. Like, it's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I mean, most of us, we come from divorced families or we had a tough childhood or people made fun of us or, the list goes on and on and on. And, I look at the people around me at the highest level and like, that was absolutely the case for so many of us. And not everyone. Like, I had a beautiful life in a lot of ways. When I have had I was filling a hole of not feeling good enough. My whole career as a kid in sports, like particularly swimming, like I was good and everyone made fun of me because I was short. I wasn't the popular kid. I would, be excited about wanting to go to the Olympics and people would say, you're never going to go. You're not talented enough, big enough, strong enough. And I wanted to prove everyone wrong. And that is a challenging place to be for a long time. And it's just not sustainable. Like that expires. You remember conscious leadership being above the line or below the line. I think most athletes are competing below the line. They're not doing it because of the love of the game.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they're trying to fill some hole in them that reaching some specific status or accolade they think will fill. I was just at the Eddie Reese retirement party, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. The amount of Olympians in that room, like just not, you're not going to repeat it.
No.
None of them swim anymore.
Really?
None of them swim. So like, how many of them actually love swimming? Football is different. You're not going to go play football by yourself. But like most of the elite athletes that I know, they're not still doing those things.
Right.
Most of them are not even training anymore.
Yeah.
Like some are, you and I are like unique in that. Like we're still training. We still really value that. Most of them are not training or doing anything. It was a means to an end. So I wonder like how many of them actually loved what they were doing. So like asking the question you asked of like, what are you in it for? Why are you here? Like, what is going to the Olympics really about? What is making money or selling a company or being the CEO of a company like really about? And you've talked about that. Like, hey, do I want to be CEO someday? If Vista came to me and they're like, hey, we want you to be a CEO of this. Like, would that be valuable? would it be worth giving up 2, 3, 4 years of time with your kids to go commit to being CEO of a Vista company? I mean, I don't know. What are you in it for?
Right.
Like, is that going to fill some hole in you? Or is that going to provide like above the line, like some beautiful learning experience that you want? If it's above the line and you want to be a CEO because you want to learn and you want to take this company to a new level because you think it's going to contribute to people in this way, like that's great. But I think so many of us, including myself, we were competing from below the line. And that's true for so many athletes, and that plagued athletics in a lot of ways. And I think that contributes to this problem of how do I transition? Because we were in an environment where we were trying to compete for something to solve something within ourselves. And that model is just not sustainable.
Yeah. So how do you think that, what does that contribute to the transition in the end? Like, how do you think that what you just talked about, like where does that fit into the transition part of this?
Like, I think you're going to have to come to a point where you just get honest and sober about what really was I competing for? What really was it about? And people who have a lot of money, they'll say like, it's not what you think it's going to be. And I realized a number of years post athletics of like, you know what? I have the exact experience of having a ton of money. The Olympic gold medal, it wasn't, I mean, all that I thought it was going to be. I mean, it was cool. Didn't change anything about me. You know, like whatever you're working for, you know, like try and really define, talk to people who have it, talk to people who've done it. Is it really what they thought it was going to be? Is it really something that's important? Like for me, it's most important now of like, who's the person that Garrett is becoming? Am I proud of that person? Am I inspired? Are my kids inspired by that version of me? Like that's really important to me. That has everything to do with my values at this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And on a personal level, even for me, it's like, what are you playing for? There's a version of me that wants to be in every moment that I'm in. Let's say like this idea, without getting too deep into like, you know, kind of Zen or meditation but like, can I be here now? Like, can I have a life where everywhere I am in that life, there's nowhere I'd rather be but that place,
Yep.
right? Whether that's sitting by myself, you know, doing 15 minutes of meditation in the morning, whether that's being right here with you right now, right? Whether that's being with my family, what I'm doing work outside of this, even professionally, it's like, can you have the conditions that there's nowhere that you'd rather be than right there? Because honestly, when we were playing, there's nowhere we'd rather be but right there.
That's it.
When we were competing.
That's
because
it.
It was so, it filled a lot of the buckets of things. Now, to your point, in order to achieve that in life beyond sport, you have to redefine your values, your success, what winning looks like, because it's not the same. And again, the way I'm asserting that it's different is it's broader and bigger. You already said it. Like the first thing you identified is this is more than just me now.
Yeah.
And so that in of itself requires reconsidering what you're playing for, right? Yep. And then you have life changes that happen that make you reconsider that, right? You get married, you have kids, maybe you have a sickness in the family or so, you know, a friend, you know, so what you're playing for can change and shift. But no, I think that's super powerful. Is there anything today, I'm curious, like, is there anything that you feel like you learned today that you didn't know coming in or feel coming in? And you don't have to say yes to that. I'm just curious, because again, that's why I'm doing this. Like, I want to kind of learn together around like, what is there around all of this? I'm curious, is there anything that dawned on you today that hadn't dawned on you prior?
Yeah, I mean, I think like sitting with this question even more of like, what are you in it for? Like, what's important about it to you? You know, keep asking yourself that question. And the answer might change. Like it might be different today versus tomorrow. And then it keeps, you know, what you just said recently, it brings me back to this video I saw recently. This guy was like, you know, shift, you know, from the idea of the pursuit of happiness to the pursuit of experience. Like I'm just experiencing, like here I am in this moment. I don't want to be anywhere else. And all of it's for me and all of it's my opportunity. And like that, like pressing into my mind more is what I need, because it's almost, you know, I don't really ever want tattoos, but it's like, you know, what are you here for? Like, what are your values? I never wanted the Olympic rings on me because it's like, I never needed to remind myself that I was an Olympian, and I never wanted anyone else to know that I was an Olympian. That was never important to me. But yeah, that question of what game am I playing and what am I in it for?
So it sounds like yeah, no, I love that. So it sounds like the identity piece of being an Olympian, you didn't struggle with leaving behind.
No.
Why is that, you think?
I don't know. I think it's just how my parents raised me. Like we just, whether I swam great or I didn't, we just always go eat afterwards and then we'd go on with our life. It's like, cool, I could have a bad meet, I remember I missed the Olympic trials in I missed the Olympics in 2004. We went out to dinner. We had a nice dinner. I was kind of sad. I remember, my dad, and I were talking about sailing. There was like sailing on TV at the restaurant. I was like, hey, do you think I could like buy a sailboat and have it on Lake Travis? And we grew up sailing and racing and I was on racing teams. He's like, yeah, let's like look at that when you get back to Texas. And so like a couple weeks later, I bought a sailboat and I was just sailing like, like 3-4 days a week on Lake Travis. And it's like, I was just not a swimmer. Like I had so many other aspects to me as a person and that was really valuable. And so many people you mentioned like, oh, you're not an athlete again. Like, no, I've never retired from swimming. I've never used those words. I'm still in all the drug testing pools. I'm never taking myself out of the drug testing pool. So many people do. Like, I am an athlete. I trained this morning. I will always be an athlete. It is fundamental to who I am. I'm not competing at the same, level that I was before, but I competed 2 years ago in Israel. I can compete tomorrow if I want to. You know what I mean? Like, I always want to be ready.
I forgot that you did that in Israel. Yeah.
Like, I have this thing, like, with my kids, like, I am ready at all times. I remember you said, like, you were training, you were on the beach with your kids, and both of them wanted to be on you, and you were carrying the beach bag, and you're like, that's why I'm training.
Yeah.
When my daughters don't want to walk in the hot sand, and I got to carry the beach bag, here I am.
Yeah.
Like, I've often said, like, I'll go run a 50K mountain race today. Like, I always want to be ready for that.
Yeah. I think that that's actually a pretty hallmark. I've heard a few different athletes talk about this. I think we all, not only take pride in being an athlete, but feel at our best when we are athletic, which is meaning we are capable, right?
Yep.
Physically, because so much of what we've learned, and actually there's a book called, I think it's The Five Intelligences, but it's about different kinds of intelligence. And there is a kinetic intelligence, which is your ability to connect with your body. And we all probably have some level of that. So when that body is off, like we are off, right?
Yep.
But there's that. And then there's this idea that like we are trained to be ready. Like we're always getting ready for competition.
Yep.
I mean, when weren't we, and I still have nightmares about the fact that I might go a summer and forget to train accidentally and have to show up to preseason and do a Cooper test and like not be ready to pass the Cooper. Like I still have those nightmares. It's like, August 2nd, I got to report to camp in 2 weeks. I'm like, what did I do for the last 6 weeks? I wasn't training. It's like, it's a nightmare of a dream that I didn't train to be ready, know? So I think there's probably an element of that, but,
Alexander Popov, great Russian swimmer. Like he had this thing where he would just have his coach like come to him randomly in the day or in the night, like wake him up at 2 in the morning. And like, we're going to the pool and you're racing 100 freestyle right now. Cause he wanted to be like, just ready. Like, it doesn't matter. Any time of day or night, I'm going to bust a 48 in the 100-meter freestyle. I'm ready. And I think like the key of being an exceptional athlete and primed up is like, you can manufacture a result when required. Like there was a specific moment in 2008, I was behind the blocks. Lezak was in the heat in front of me. He had said to me, 8 months earlier, like, you'll never beat me while I'm swimming. And I painted in my room on glow in the dark paint, 100 free AR 48-16. Every night I looked at that and I visualized what that was going to be like breaking his American record. We're at the Olympic trials. He's in the heat in front of me. I never usually watch what people are doing in the heat in front of me, but the crowd's getting up, the announcer's up. He ends up breaking his American record right now. And then just like adrenaline just pours through me. My armpits start to sweat. I get on the block and I say to myself, like, this is my moment. This is a defining moment of my athletic career. I'm going to break this American record right now. I have to do it. So I dive off, my right goggle pops off. and I'm like, I just keep swimming. I'm feeling amazing. I come back. I'm like having this awesome race. I hit the wall and it didn't even feel like I had like worked. I just felt amazing. I broke 48 seconds, first American under 48 seconds in the 100 freestyle, went 47.7, smashed his record by 0.4 of a second. And there is this aspect of like, just prepare yourself to always be ready, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it means. Like whatever your kids need, whatever your wife needs, whatever my team at Gather needs, like just prepare to always be ready. you can't force a result every time. Like the world is just going to ensue around us, but like we always have a choice of how we're going to show up.
Yeah.
You can always control your attitude and your effort. And those two things, like you do those two things right and you live within your values, and I think you're going to live a great life.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please review and follow this podcast on all your favorite platforms. And if you want to continue the conversation one-on-one, feel free to reach out direct. You can find my information in the show notes. And we want to share your story. So if you're passionate about helping others through transitions to find their center and find their best path forward, feel free to reach out and let me know. Until the next time.